You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm James Creedon. Our headlines from across the continent this evening. Senegal's President Macky Sall has opened an international forum on peace and security in Dakar. He called on the UN to urgently strengthen its peacekeeping mission in northern Mali. This as scores were killed in an offensive by jihadists on Monday. Ethiopia is gearing up for a major test for democracy this week as a referendum will take place for autonomy in the Sidama region. The vote had previously been cancelled due to violent clashes. And new laws in Morocco aim to modernise collective land ownership, chiefly benefiting women, but not all are pleased with the innovations. We'll bring you more on that later on in the show. Thanks for watching. Now we start this bulletin with news that at least 24 Malian soldiers have been killed and scores more wounded in the north of the country near the border with Niger. A counter-offensive killed some 17 jihadist militants. The statement said an army patrol was engaged by, quote, terrorists near the town of Tabancourt. Some 100 fighters were taken into custody later with the assistance of French and Nigerian forces in northern Mali, of course, in the hands of jihadists since 2012. Now, the violence in northern Mali took place as an international forum on peace and security kicked off in Dakar on Monday. The hosting Senegalese President called for the UN Security Council to agree to a stronger mandate for the UN peacekeeping forces in Mali. Laurent Berstecker has the story.
An international peace forum taking place in a tense security context. For French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe, this month's attacks in Mali and Burkina Faso show that the fight against terrorism in the Sahel region is far from won.
Jihadist groups will capitalize on our weaknesses, on our lack of coordination, our lack of funds and training. We cannot give them this chance.
Earlier this month, a deadly terrorist attack by Islamic State militants near the Mali-Niger border left 50 people dead, most of them Malian soldiers. Days later, 37 people were killed in an ambush in the east of neighboring Burkina Faso. The attacks underscored the growing influence of jihadist groups in the Sahel region, more than 15 years after they first began operating in Mali. They're now spread across several countries and often engage in cross-border raids. Faced with these mobile guerrilla groups and their use of hit-and-run tactics, several African heads of state have called for more resources and for increased cooperation between counter-terrorism actors in the region.
We must prioritize mobile regional forces with a better knowledge of the area, rather than a heavily equipped and static mission with a mandate that's often too costly.
There are currently 3 international counter-terrorism missions operating in the Sahel region. The MINUSMA, the UN's peacekeeping force in Mali, the G5 Sahel, which includes soldiers from Mauritania, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali and Chad, and Operation Barkhane, which is led by the French army.
Now to some other stories from across the continent. Niger's main opposition leader Hama Amadou is back behind bars after returning home from 3 years of exile in France. His intention was to complete a sentence in Niger before running for president. Amadou's return could reignite tensions between the government and the opposition ahead of elections in late 2020 to select a successor to President Mamadou Issoufou. Former British Minister Peter Hain accused international corporations and banks of aiding and abetting graft in South Africa. The one-time anti-apartheid activist was testifying at a commission probing state corruption under President Jacob Zuma. Hain specifically mentioned HSBC, Standard Chartered and the Bank of Baroda by name. Now, staying in South Africa, the state carrier SAA is in the midst of a major strike since last Friday. It said that flights will now resume to 6 African destinations after hundreds of cancellations over recent days. But several domestic flights will not go ahead over the next couple of days. The strike has cast doubt on the very survival of the airline, which hasn't turned a profit since 2011. Now, Ethiopia is due for its first test of democracy since the reformist Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took power in April 2018. On Wednesday, residents of the southern Sidama region will vote in a referendum on whether to form an autonomous government. At least 2.3 million voters will take part in the poll, which was postponed in July after violent clashes killed over 50 people. France 24's Nathalie Tissot went to the regional capital, Hawassa, to take a look at preparations for the vote.
These people have come to get voter ID cards. Anyone who's lived here for at least 6 months qualifies, and most who live here are part of the Sidama community, the regional majority ethnic group. Solomon hopes for a new state after decades of fighting against former regimes for more autonomy. Statehood could mean control of the budget and tax rates and a change in language.
Economically, politically, socially, it means a lot for these people. In the southern region, 56 nationalities are included. It's a bulk.
Voters choose. A Sidama jar is a yes, a traditional hut is against the measure. In the streets, symbols of autonomy are overwhelming, like at the entrance of the town hall. Not everyone shares this enthusiasm, particularly other ethnic groups. Some are hesitant to address the issue.
It's not good to talk to the media about this. So the card is in your hand, you go to the polling station with it, then decide what you want.
Over the last 18 months, intercommunal violence has killed dozens of people. 135 electoral observers dispatched here are keenly aware of the stakes and have been trained by the EU and the US.
We should not think that every election will be smooth. What we want to prevent is that the irregularities are not so much to undermine the credibility of elections.
If the yes vote succeeds, Hawassa will remain the capital for 10 years, the period required to form an independent Sidama state. Others in Ethiopia dream of similar autonomy and are pushing for referendums, leaving the future of a very diverse country uncertain.
To Morocco next, and the tricky issue of land ownership. Most of the country's land is held collectively by tribes, with the state serving as a trustee. Now, in a bid to legally clarify what can often be an opaque system, 3 new laws have been passed by the government. Women's rights are progressing when it comes to land ownership, in particular inheritance rights, which were previously overlooked. But many in the Sulaliyat ethnicity are not happy with the latest changes. Our reporters went to find out more.
In Morocco, collective lands, or Sulaliyats, make up about 35% of the country. According to a decree which was issued in 1919 under the French Protectorate, they are under the guardianship of the Minister of the Interior. Whenever this land is given away by the state, rights holders are expelled in return for compensation, but women are often excluded. 3 new laws have now been passed to modernise land management, laws allowing private investment projects and that finally grant women the same rights as men. Reform welcomed by Saida, whose family has lived on this land for generations.
Is the Interior Minister, who administers the collective land, not able to protect our community from the real estate mafia? Is the public interest really in golf, villas and apartments?
According to the Interior Minister, appropriation of collective land profits around 10 million rights holders.
In 5 or 6 years, we estimate that up to 1.5 million hectares will be appropriated in the interest of the rights holders, men and women, currently using these lands. The way this used to be done was not equal between men and women. The aim of this law is to put an end to that.
For 12 years, this feminist association has been fighting to end the tribal management of collective lands.
The law mentions men and women, which is new, so men and women will be treated in the same way. But the law doesn't talk about equality. We would have liked a clear reference to equality between men and women.
A group of residents have been protesting the new laws. For them, equality is not the issue. They just want rights to their land.
We want young men, Solalea women, and men to be compensated. Everyone the same.
Important economic and social consequences lie in this cluster of issues and concern the role of men and women across Moroccan society.
Now, France has restored an historical artefact previously held at Paris's Quai Branly Museum to Senegal. The French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe handed the 19th century sword to President Macky Sall in a ceremony in Dakar on Sunday evening. The sword had belonged to an Islamic scholar and ruler, Omar Saidou Tal, was a key figure in the anti-colonial struggle against France. Now, over recent years, a concerted drive involving UNESCO and various African states has pushed for a commitment by European countries to return key artefacts of cultural heritage to their original homes. That's all for this edition of Eye on Africa. Thanks for watching.
Join us for a special farming-themed edition of Talking Europe from the Portuguese archipelago of Madeira, an autonomous region of Portugal that's actually closer to Africa. We're finding out how farmers here cope with that remoteness, as well as the volcanic soils and the subtropical climes. See you soon. Talking Europe on France 24.
Talking Europe, presented by Catherine Nicholson on France 24 and France24.com.